Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode. Today I have with me James Kimani. James has over 24 years experience. He joins us as a senior resource analyst with long tenure between different organizations, and James will be joining us today to go over the pivotal role of data integration and how important informed decision making is for workforce management. Join us. This episode is sponsored by Injingsu, but more on that later.
James, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm okay, not bad. It's a Friday afternoon.
It's the best day of the week.
Oh, yes.
James, before any ado, today we have an episode dedicated to data integration and decision making, which I think it will be super interesting. But more than anything else, I would love for you to kind of introduce a bit yourself. Tell us who you are and what you have been doing recently.
Okay. So, yes, like you said, my name is James Kimani, and I've been working in the workforce management space for the last 25 years, believe it or not, since the beginning of this century. So you can see how old I am. And if I take a step back, I started off as an agent back in the late 1990s after I'd finished a university and I was looking for something to do. And I worked my way through from being an agent to a team manager, so all in customer services for a telecoms company. And then at the end of 1999, I was given the opportunity to join the project team. That was the resource planning team back then. And then from there, my interest grew. So I started working as a real-time analyst. And then I wanted to develop my skills and then became a forecasting and planning manager for a telecoms company. And at that time, I also developed an interest in technology, which we are going to be discussing later, and some of the platforms and how they work together. And then, and from there on, I've probably worked for maybe close to about 20 different companies the last 25 years, if you can believe it. And there's a majority of contract and permanent work, hence why I've been everywhere. And that's given me exposure to all the different cultures, so to all the different ways of doing things, to different WFM systems, that I've worked with, which we'll probably touch on during this discussion.
Yeah.
And by the same time, I also developed my technical skills around being able to build capacity plans outside the technology. Because as you probably see, the technology is fine as an enabler, but it's also good for me to understand the technical skills of how everything comes together before you get to that data integration and how that then looks like in some of the customer experience. So like I said, I've worked along on a number of sectors. So from telecoms, airlines, I've worked for government departments. I've worked for an outsourcer. So my current role is with an outsourcer where we manage very big clients. And now my next step now, I'm now at that stage where maybe I'm probably going to get to a point where I'm happy with where I am, but maybe try and understand, say, for example, how AI and machine learning are likely to affect people like myself going forward. So I'm very conscious of what's coming, but hopefully we can touch on that in this discussion. So that's me, really.
So, James, loads of experience, and I think he couldn't be a better guest for the topic today. And before we go deeper in some of the things you kind of hinted, I think one of the things we briefly touched when we were doing kind of like a sync is there is a lot to be said about decision making. There is loads of moving pieces here and there, but one of the pieces that always have been part and crucial part of workforce management professionals is related with integrations. In integrations, meaning data integration, systems, how they communicate with each other, and to build the capacity plan, whatever it is, how you can extract data and build something that actually provides clear intel to what's the next step. I wanted to start there by asking you about, in your view, what do you think it's the role of that data integration? What does it mean in the context of workforce management, and how crucial it is for us as WFM professionals, but in the end of the day for the decision making process?
For me, the data integration, for example, if we just take a very simple, say, a telephony platform data integration, because that's where most people start. So for me, a good data integration is the one that gives you the, if you like, the historical data that you need to then be able to produce future plans with and ensuring that you have the data integrity. So one thing that springs to mind. So I've been involved in a number of data integration in places where I've had to roll out a workforce management platform. So for me, it's about bringing all the separate systems. So your telephony platform, your messaging platform, your CRM's platforms. I'm talking about things like Salesforce and Zendesk, having all that data pointing into one platform. So whether that's the likes of in Jigsaw or any of the other workforce planning platform, is first of all making sure that the integration is giving you the data that you need. So you can have an integration, but if the data is not usable, for me, it almost becomes a waste of time. And what I mean about that is that, so the question I normally ask myself, can I use that data, for example, to understand future trends, to understand customer behavior? So for the different channels, not just voice, but for messaging platforms, for email, all those integration need to be taken into account, because customer preferences have now changed. Not everyone wants to call. Some customers want to email, they want to use social media. It's understanding, is that giving me the key metrics that I need around, for example, average handling times? Is that giving me information around agent behavior, around adherence? Adherence is a very big area, especially when businesses have invested so much. They need to understand, will those integration give me what I want? If they're not, I've got examples where integration hasn't been done properly. And the consequence of that is that you almost end up adding on to your cost, because you then have to employ more humans to be able to deal with the fallout. So for me, it's the outset for me is from the outset understanding what it is that we're trying to achieve from this data integration, and then looking how you make that happen.
Mhm. And you mentioned a good point, because a bad integration would lead to probably harder decisions. But sometimes you are kind of blind. You have blind spots,
Yes.
and by the time you actually figure out how to deal with that blind spot, it's probably too late and will be more expensive. So the good integration actually helps a lot on that front. And one of the pieces on integrations, and you mentioned that a lot about changing either to a WFM software or whatever transition you are doing technologically speaking.
Mhm.
We could also look at the struggle that many organizations face with siloed data, because the systems do not communicate with each other, or
Yeah.
either they are legacy and they cannot move to the cloud and actually integrate.
Yeah.
And is there any advice for, like, let's say companies that are looking to integrate and replace those systems? Now,
Yeah.
you have been doing with this for a long time. What
Yeah.
advice would you give for someone looking to
Yeah.
move away from that?
Yeah. So moving away from a legacy system. Okay. So for me, and again, for me, using a real life example, for me, the first question I'll be asking around there is almost, I'll compare the cost of building what we call bespoke connections or APIs versus investing in a new platform that can integrate very easily with some of the off-the-shelf WFM systems. So that'll be the first thing I'll be looking at. And also, the business needs to understand what it is are they trying to accomplish. So, for example, are they looking for better agent management? Is it around real-time adherence? Are they looking to improve efficiencies within their contact center? When I talk about things like optimized scheduling, moving away from things like Excel, is it about enhancing our customer experience? So, for example, if they're using an IVR system, can that IVR system be integrated with the current technologies that they're looking to invest in? And also, is it about improving their forecast accuracy? So that's another key area I think people tend to overlook in terms of what can the legacy system that I've got now, can it be integrated with a much newer technology and still give me the accuracy that I'm looking for? And also, is there any scope there for things like scenario planning or data modeling for the future? So when you have special events, when you're coming up to peak period, is a legacy system fit enough to be able to give me the view that, for example, if I'm planning for Black Friday, will that system have the data that I need to be able to give me the data to make those informed decisions? And also, but then the key thing for me as well, Andre, is around understanding that the technology for me is just the enabler. They need to understand the processes for me. If you forget about the technology, they need to understand the processes have to be bang on before you even get to that point where you're starting integration. So that's the approach I've taken, or maybe that's one of the lessons I've learned over the last 25 years.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned technology as an enabler, because very often I see some people doing mistake, which is, oh, because we now have that platform, okay, it's problem solved. But actually, it's the other way around. the processes, like you are saying, have a much bigger role to play than sometimes the technology itself, and that's an interesting one. You touched a bit on kind of like real world examples, like you mentioned about the impact it has on the resource plannings, or like when you're planning for a peak season, you mentioned Black Friday, and you kind of hinted some of the examples on the importance of that data integration. I wanted to understand from you from a more strategical standpoint, when we are modeling those scenarios and trying to get the strategic decisions on recommendations to do, like, how do you approach that modeling? What are some of the benefits you have seen by that real world example that you were trying to in a bit, like how important it is and how big of an impact it has on the day to
Yeah.
day?
So for me, if I just take a step back, the first step around that data modeling is first of all understanding from the key stakeholders what's the end game, what is are we trying to achieve. So what I'm talking about there is things around what SLAs or service levels are we targeting. Are we, for example, looking to recruit? What different skills do we need within the team? So again, going back, taking a step back, understanding from the stakeholders what it is we're trying to achieve, and then if I give you again another real life example, when I was working for in a fintech, we always knew that around the 2 weeks before Christmas were the busiest weeks. So again, because of the data integration that we had with all the different systems, I was able to then go back and look at the historical data. So for me, the historical data is key. And whether that data is coming straight from the telephone platform, ideally it's coming straight from the WFM platform, because you get it down to intraday level. Is then understanding how easily can I get that historical data to then be able to model the the future by just tweaking some of the key levels of key metrics. So that's been my approach, and again, like I said, understanding from the key stakeholders what it is that they're trying to achieve, and then what I'll then normally do in those scenarios is present different outcomes in scenarios, because the other thing that comes into this is the cost. As you probably be aware, cost is a key thing. So, for example, what I normally do is say, if you want to operate in a blended environment, and this is where the technology help, yeah. If you want our agents to be in a blended environment, the cost is X, but the CSAT might be X, and the average hunter might be X. So that's one scenario. If you want agents to work in if you like, bespoke or separate channels, then the employee engagement is X, because they're not feeling as pressurized. The cost might be higher, but then the customer experience might be, might be enhanced. So that's how I've been able to use the data modeling.
It's all about presenting even for decision-making process.
Yeah.
Different trade-offs. What are the scenarios? What are the metrics you should expect? And setting that strategical expectation as a part.
Exactly. And whoever's making those decisions, whoever's signing the checks, they have the confidence that the data we're utilizing is fit for purpose, because I provide, if you like, steps and rationale around why I've used data from this period instead of that period, and then being able to provide caveats around, we might have had a special day where something went wrong. It's also being able to tell the story around what data sets you're using and building that confidence.
And now a word to our sponsor, Injinxo. With Injinxo, simplicity meets power. It's a complete cloud-based AI-driven WFM solution that optimizes processes from start to finish, including forecasting, scheduling, and real-time monitoring. Empowering employees with mobile-optimized self-service portal makes employee engagement an integral part of workforce management. It combines cutting-edge functionality and seamless integration with leading contact center platform. For more information, please check the first link on the description. And now, back to the podcast.
And definitely that plays then and kind of segueing that from when you think about the modeling, that the strategic decisions we were just discussing, there is one part which is about some mistakes that are done, and you kind of touched upon, like, one of the ones that I will open for you to give your insights as well, is many times people get so stuck in one way of seeing things that what you were saying, which is providing scenarios and providing different ways to achieve the same result, That is a key part in my personal view of what the role of being a partner within WFM should be for the different operations. But the truth is, many times we get stuck into one direction. Even when we implement new systems, what we try to do is fit whatever we have already today into the system instead of, okay, let me see what this enables me to do differently that I was not being able to do. And that opens the door for you, what we were just describing, which is, okay, those are the different trade-offs, those are the different paths, and then it's all about planning in advance. What would be your take on that approach into kind of like risk management, like strategic planning? Like, are there common mistakes that you see people when they are trying to implement either from a data integration standpoint or like leveraging and partnering with the operations? And what would be your recommendations there?
Yeah, unfortunately, Andre, yes. Again, I've seen a lot. So my serious point here for me is around, and we're going through this now at the moment in my current role. So it's almost, for me, you have to do this properly. So when I say properly, you have to understand the importance of that end-to-end integration. So, for example, you can't just integrate one channel, for example, say voice, and forget about your messaging platforms, forget about your CRM, because all these play into the whole end-to-end journey for the customer around customer experience, have impact on employee satisfaction. And they also hopefully help, if you do it properly, they help you reduce your costs. I'm going to what I said earlier in our discussion. Organizations tend, as a first port of call, they'll see the workforce technology as the solution instead of as the enabler. So, and then at that point, it then gets to a point where there's if the technology is not delivering what they're expecting, they're blaming the technology. So I've seen that as well. So for me, I guess the main point is around get away from the halfway integration or the minimum viable product. If you're going to do this properly, it needs to be for every single channel, end to end, to be able to, if you like, see the return on investment that you're expecting, but also the positive impact is likely to have on your employee and your customers.
And let me touch on what you just described, which I think it's another part. You mentioned before we're doing examples like when you were comparing like CSAT, we were comparing like different KPIs in terms of like whatever the outcome is. You mentioned cost. One of the other pieces I think that could lead to certain mistakes, and I would love your thoughts here, is some of the organizations just focus on purely on that cost component and they disregard some of the other metrics, which might be more expensive, even though, okay, I'm saving now immediately, but then when you look to kind of like to the forefront, is like, am I compromising customer experience? And then what's the backlash that will have?
Yeah.
Do you see that, especially because I think more recently there are two waves? There was a big wave on increase customer experience and try to get the customer on the forefront. That happened more recently, and then we touched a bit on AI, and then now with AI, that is actually going a bit against what was a few years ago everywhere the industry was trying to do, because now we were like, can I fast track certain cases? Can I just move experience to either chatbots, whatever it is? Am I compromising the experience in the end of the day? And then there are some of the organizations in between trying, how the hell am I going to balance that? What would be your take on that?
Yeah, I was actually going to come that on around the AI thing, because I think, but so the cost one is interesting. And I've been in places where I've had to fight back with the management, senior managers around costs, because for me, the customer experience, if a customer wants to speak to a human being, for me, that's still very important. If we've taken if an organization has taken money from a customer, and then we're trying to make it as difficult for them to get through to an agent as possible. I can give you a real life example. So again, in a fintech company, so we had Salesforce integrated with another platform called Teleopti. And from that, I could tell from the data around the customer experience, customer satisfaction, I was able to demonstrate to the business that by making it difficult for customers to get through to an agent when they want to, instead of forcing them to self-serve, we were losing that business. Customers were ending up going elsewhere. And I was also then able, again, because of data integration, I was able to show the correlation between the contact drivers and the average handling time for each of those corresponding contact drivers. And then to demonstrate that we weren't actually saving any cost. Because, for example, we were then having to refund the customer for the transactions that they generated after complaining. So we're not saving there. We're actually losing revenue by stopping customers from being able to get through. So for me, so I think the cost element can be sometimes, if you like, a red herring for most organizations. But I think it's for people like myself and workforce professionals to be able to utilize the integration of the data that's available to be able to tell that story and articulate what the impact of the overall, not just the impact on the customer, but also the impact on the agents, because they're the ones who, if a customer does finally get through, the first thing they want to do is complain or scream at the agent. And then you then see in the data. So, for example, and then that has an impact on your on agent productivity. You can see on things like real-time adherence. So all these things are interjoined, and so we focus too much on that cost element. I think we, as the professionals, we're in the best place position to be able to utilize the data that we have to tell that story.
Interesting. You mentioned that, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of pick a bit on your career and like how do you see the future trends happening is, and we touched a bit on AI. There is loads of machine learning, and I know close examples that people are tapping in on different algorithms to forecast, and like they then try to leverage different systems to push their own produced outputs. How do you see that the future? And by the future, I see what will be integrations already have a big role to play. I think over time we will have a bigger role to play because we need data to a lot of these technologies. And what are the trends that, in the end of the day, the WFM profession should be looking out for, in your view?
For me, and I think this is something so around machine learning and AI. So again, going back to that customer experience. So for example, it's being able to match customers to the right agent. And the way I mean that, so let's say me as a customer, I'll come through on the IVR. So the organization already knows, for example, I don't know, I support Liverpool FC, and also you as the agent support Liverpool FC. So they'll try and route the call to someone with similar likes as myself. And then you got that connection, do you understand? Or for example, we could be from the same part of the country, same regional accent. I know simple things like that make all the difference. And all that information is available to the organization. And then the technology or the machine learning will then try and direct that contact to an agent with those similar skill set. And that, once you've got that connection with that individual, you're more likely to upsell to them or give them a better service. So those are the kind of small things I see in terms of that human interaction.
Yeah.
If you then flip it on the other side, so for me, if we go to probably the machine learning and AI, where we're expecting customers to self-serve, I think, and we're saying it now, I think there's an issue at the moment with the lack of human interaction and loneliness. So sometimes people will pick up the phone to try and speak to someone because they just want that human interaction. So I think there's a danger with AI and machine learning that we start losing that completely, and then people become much more lonely. And so I think that's something. It's about striking that balance around between how much technology do we want to utilize to help the customer self-serve versus making sure that we're not using that human interaction, because we put all this technology, all these bots ahead of speaking to a real person. So that's something I think about a lot.
I think if you allow me kind of summarizing and connecting back to what we were saying in the beginning. So you mentioned about the integrations and the systems as an enabler. I think data is an enabler as well.
Yes.
And now some of this technology will be future enablers. So again, I think there will definitely be a space for everything. Of course, we just need to figure out a way to work out with those different technologies and enable ourselves to do a better job in the end of the day. James, kind of like, I would love to hear any recommendations you would share with the audience to anyone that is on a journey now to either integrate a new system, bring in the WFM software, or just tapping in on new technologies. What would be your recommendations for someone starting that journey now?
Okay, so I'll take you back to the first. So the first part for me, if we just put the technology to one side for now, so it's understanding outside the technology, around what does that plan look like in terms of if you're doing a future capacity plan or forecasting, what does that look like away from the technology? So that'll be the first step, because sometimes technology fails, so you almost need to have a backup plan in place around how you get those plans into fruition. But for me, if you're starting now, is understanding. So, for example, the data that you have in your current systems, is it usable in its current format? Because what you don't want to do before the integration is do a lot of heavy lifting, trying to get the data into a format that can then be imported into your WFM platform, because you're just creating more work and more costs. So that's a key thing. Is the data usable? Is the data going to be able to, if you like, help you make the key decisions, both strategic and tactical, around your requirements down the road? And also another key thing for me is around away from the technology, you need to make sure that the people in your business in WFM, they have the technical skills, but they also have to, for me, in all the teams that I've managed and led, they have to have an interest in WFM. If you have people in your team that do not have an interest in WFM, then you'll be carrying passengers. So so the technology is fine. So the process as well, I think I've mentioned that a few times. The process, you cannot, if you get that wrong, you can't turn around and blame the technology and say, oh yeah, Jigsaw did this, Teleopti did this. I've seen that before. And like I said, we're going through that now with another integration that we're doing to a new HR system. But the process has to be 100%. So you cannot blame the technology. So just to summarize, for me, it's understand the technical requirement outside the technology. Make sure that the data that you want to integrate is usable, that you're not having to do a lot of heavy lifting to get it to the right state. And also make sure that the data will give you the outputs that you're looking for to be able to identify trends. And also making sure that around people, apart from the WFM team, is also making sure when you installing this or making this data integration, the other people that you need to bring along is the operations. And I'm talking about the managers, the agents. And just quickly, I got my fingers burnt a few years ago in my first implementation of a WFM platform. I forgot to sell the message to the agents and to the operation around. All they thought was, oh, this is Big Brother coming to, watch what I'm doing when I'm going to the toilet, when I'm going to the break. So I learned my lesson at the outset. Say you have to get the message across why we need this technology, and also sell the benefits. So, for example, agents being able to swap shifts, for example, without having to speak to a team manager, booking time off, all these elements. If you can sell it to the agent and to the operation, it makes it much easier with the integration and also with them with implementing any new technology.
I couldn't agree more with you in terms of that, everyone that has a role, regardless of what that role is, should be at the table, at least trying to know what the direction is, what is expected, how things will impact their day to day. Because, like you said, it's very often everyone feels like, oh, this is my system. Why? They just need to be aware. But I think it helps a lot, because there is a big part of soft skills in managing change that actually are very meaningful to achieve the end result. So I couldn't agree more with what you just said.
Yeah, agreed.
James, one thing that you spoke a lot, and I wanted to really emphasize, is about the process. Regardless of the technology, regardless of whatever it is, I think the process plays a very important role.
Yeah.
And knowing the process, knowing which persons are part of the process, what steps, what data do you need, I think it's so fundamental to have that built in and understood by everyone that is an actor on that role or within the WFM. That I really wanted to get that point across. But James, final words, any thoughts for the audience?
Any thought for the audience? So for me, like I said, I'm very passionate about WFM, which is why I'm still around here for 25 years. Yeah, but I think for me, in any environment, like in this environment where we're dealing with customers, any data, we should always think about the customer at the forefront. Or when we're doing any of these integrations, what's that journey like for the customer? Yeah, so are you going to create more friction for the customer, not just for the customer, but for the agents as well? But also realize that you can have too much data. For me, it's about having the right data to be able to make those insightful decisions using what you've already got, and then deciding what's not important and what you need to disregard, and around understanding if you're going to do this, it needs to be done properly. So when I say properly, it can't be a minimum viable product. If you're going to integrate all your systems, obviously bearing in mind that we've got customers that have choice around which channel they want to use. So, and also it also helps create that blended environment if that's what you're looking for. It can't be a halfway house. It's all or nothing is my parting shot on that.
Thank you. Hopefully everyone in that journey will learn a bit from what we've just discussed. James, it was a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
The episode today was sponsored by Injingsu. For more, visit the first link on the description.